Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this discussion for an Engineering Leader's Guide to Reporting Up. This is a Lead Dev webinar produced in partnership with Linear B. This webinar is going to last about 45 minutes, and then the panelists and myself will jump into the continuous learning channel on the Lead Dev Slack to answer questions. There may also be some time to answer questions during the panel, so please use the Q&A tools in Zoom itself, and maybe there'll be some time towards the end. So let's get started with some intros. Hi, I'm Lisa Van Gelder. I'll be a moderator for this panel. I'm currently in between jobs, but my last job was VP engineering at a small startup called Avir, and I'm based in Brooklyn. And I'm joined by some amazing panelists, some great engineering leaders who are here to share their experiences and their insights. Let's hear a bit about them and why they're excited to be here. And I'll start with Tanisha.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tanisha Barnett. I am currently in Atlanta, Georgia. I work for the company Intuit, working specifically on the MailChimp product. And really why I am excited to be here is to be able to learn and also to share the different experiences that I've had throughout my career on our upper management and leadership and what that means, because not only do we have leadership, but we are leadership. So to be able to share and learn, I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Tremail.
Hi, everyone. Tremail Turner here in New York. I currently serve as the Senior Vice President of Engineering for Action IQ, building the world's best CDP. And I am excited to be here today because, as we all know, these roles are quite lonely. And similar to what Tanisha was saying, the opportunity to learn from each other and to share our experiences and hopefully all grow together is one that I value greatly. So really happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Ishai.
Hey everyone, Ishai Biri. I'm the CTO at Linear B, based in Tel Aviv. Linear B is one of the leading software engineering intelligence platforms, SCI in short. That's how Gartner is starting to uh, shape the market we're in. And I've been, thinking about reporting up or managing up as a leader of the engineering organization, both as things that I do myself, but also talking with hundreds of dev leaders and understanding the challenges that they are facing when talking about engineering to the rest of the org. So definitely an exciting subject for me to talk about and learn.
Yeah, hugely. It can be a scary thing when you have to report to folks maybe that you haven't reported to before. So let's start with the preparation end. Like, how do you pick which data you think you should present to folks, or how do you choose your metrics? Ishai, how do you choose which metrics to highlight if you're going to report, and then how do you know if you got it right?
Yeah, so there's an underlying question about like, should you even use metrics or start with metrics? And I think that deserves a little attention, that question. Having data, having metrics, having a way to measure that is consistent, is comparable. You can see a trend. You can maybe benchmark. Um, that elevates the discussion in so many ways. And we see in the boardroom or in the staff meeting where the sales leaders have numbers. They have metrics. There are ways to measure and even standardized ways to measure sales or marketing or customer success. Engineering has long been kind of behind on this. So at least my answer is yes, definitely use metrics and use data. So it's not just an opinion, but also there's some hard facts. And when thinking about which metrics should we surface, um, I think the most important thing to remember is the kind of dual mandate that engineering leaders have to shoulder. They have to think about the efficiency, the productivity of their organization. Are we efficient with the huge resources that we are given? Engineering is typically the largest or almost the largest spend in most modern companies. Is that efficient? Are we wasting time? Are we having developers context switch or wait for others and blocked? But also the second mandate, which is sometimes overlooked, are we working on the right things? Are we actually investing those, fine-tuned processes into building what matters for the business. And that's not an efficiency question. It's a business alignment question. So whatever you choose, have enough representation of both sides of both mandates, the efficiency and there we recommend looking at process metrics that identify bottlenecks, or are we efficient as a team rather than in individuals? Cycle time is a great example. Understanding where we can we start and finish delivery of a single item quickly, and that encompasses a lot of moving parts in getting that metric right. And on the business alignment side, are we building the right things? Is our investment aligned with what the business needs? Are we terribly efficient but on the wrong items? Then we're missing something. So on that side, I would typically highlight either the top investments, which are the top projects that are getting investment, actual work getting into those projects, something around the investment profile. Are we delivering new value? Are we maintaining existing stuff? That's a different mix of where is our investment going, and something about predictability. Are we are we hitting our sprints or our projects on time? The degree in which we are predictable to the business. That's my input on metrics.
I love it. There's a lot of really great advice there. But the second part of that, is there some kind of signal you get in a meeting when you've picked the right metrics? Like, do you know, or is it just that people's eyes are glazing over when you're putting cycle time up there? Like, how do you get the feedback of like, yes, this is the right thing to communicate?
Yeah, I think as engineering, an engineering leader in the boardroom or staff meeting, probably more in the former, the eyes are glazing to begin with, right? We're all used to being the having that one slide and 2 minutes at the end. Everyone has already bashed over all the data in sales, and that's where there's revenue. There's people are used to looking at numbers there, even if they're not salespeople or marketing experts. There's that barrier to overcome. How do you make this relevant and interesting and something that should be discussed? I think you get it right when you get asked questions. When everyone just nods, you know that it's not interesting enough. It's not when there's questions, when they challenge you, what are you going to do about this? Is this trending in the right way? What does it mean? Engagement is, to me, the single sign of yeah, we have selected the right things, and now there's a good discussion.
I love it. That's such a clear signal to look out for. Tanisha, you're nodding a lot as Yishai was speaking. Do you have thoughts also on the metrics and picking the right ones?
I do. It may sound kind of silly, but it's also about knowing your audience. So, we talk about whether we're in the boardroom, where we're in a team meeting, what levels are in the meeting, and that will kind of determine what metrics you really need to be highlighting. Because at some levels, the data may be very specific. You've got burn down charts, things like that. In a boardroom, it may be more about KPIs and how are we driving the outcomes of the business. So I think it's really about the knowing your audience and what metrics needs to be highlighted for that audience so that they aren't glazing over, because I agree, we're at the end, everybody has heard everything else, and we're coming in trying to communicate what our outcomes are and how are things being done and how do we prove that. So I think that's an important part of really knowing your audience so that you know what metrics is important to them. As far as how do you know you got it right, I would say it's also about your audience. So in some cases, you may have a leader, like I've had a leader before where if they asked more than 4 questions, it wasn't right. It wasn't clear. I didn't get it right. But if I knew I was under the 4-question threshold for that particular person, I knew I got it right. And it was clear and I articulated what I needed to get across. And then on the other hand, if I am as far as engagement, if there's no questions, then I start to question myself, did I get it right? Or did people just kind of glaze over and it wasn't at the right levels?
I like it. There's a lot of getting to know your specific stakeholders and seeing what works for them.
Yes, absolutely.
Love it. All right, Tremail, I think you also had some good ideas about how to adapt your message. Like once you know your stakeholders, how do you adapt your message so that it actually gets through to them?
Yeah, Tanisha and Yishai really covered a lot of the ground here. And so maybe I'll go a different direction and say, like with all engineering problems, it depends, right? You need to know your audience, obviously. You need to understand the context that you operate in, obviously. But then there are certain tools that perhaps you bring to the table that can enhance the message that you want to deliver. I think a lot of times we fall into the trap of being technology leaders and thinking that people expect us to be brilliant technologists that have all the answers and can speak deeply about bits and bytes all day long. But remember that you're talking quite frequently to people who could care less. They just want you to sell if you're in vertical SaaS or if you're in uh, DAU or MAU, expansive consumer services, or if you're in video games, whatever the thing is. Ultimately, it's a business and you're trying to sell something. Or if you're an NGO and NPO, it's the people that you're serving and making sure that service gets out effectively. And so the things that might be inner loop metrics for you and are deeply important to your teams, yes, you need to have those internal conversations and know that audience well and be able to speak to that audience in a way that motivates and gets folks activated on the things that they need to do in order to help drive those outcomes. But if you're in those outer loop conversations, if you're talking to an executive team or a board or external partners, then those people want charisma. They want you to be excited. They want you to feel they want to feel like you are bringing to them solutions and that you're solution oriented, even in the face of difficult times or problems or high efficiency or any of the things that we have to deal with day in and day out. And that's especially why these roles are both difficult and, as I mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, very lonely because you don't really have a lot of folks that you can like truly depend on because no one's going to really understand your context as well as you do. And so the best advice that I can give to anyone is to spend a lot of time in conversations like this, where you can hear different perspectives and you can hear different sort of versions of how best to show up. And then you can start building that toolkit that you can rely upon when you're in different situations. Have your methods, have your methodology, have your processes and practices, but know that there are others that might be beneficial and useful depending on, again, what context you're in, or most importantly, when you need to adapt to changes within that context.
Yeah, I think that's so true. There's not going to be one size solution that is going to fit every report that you need to do. So I love the idea of building up a toolkit of different tools that you can use to try and pitch yourself right. And it's kind of on the same theme as that. Uh, if you're thinking about, again, like reporting, whether it's metrics or something else, like how do you make sure that those entry metrics are really relevant to the wider business? If you say something like cycle time, for example, maybe a lot of folks don't quite understand how that might impact something in a different department. So how do you make sure that what you are saying kind of keys into what people care about? I think Tanisha has some thoughts here.
Yeah, it's also still going back to some basics of who are you talking to? Who is this information specific for? And depending on who that is, the impact to that group of people is very important because we know in a lot of cases we have to gear what we're trying to say and what we're trying to convey to that audience so that it's important to them. It aligns with their business objectives. It crosses various channels and different ways of communicating. So some people are very visual. Some people like a lot of data. So do you have links to specifics so that you can drill down further? Or do you have videos so that someone can listen to it? And then and where are you communicating that? A lot of people like email. Some people like it printed so that they can read it offline. Some people are electronic. It's just different ways. And so that's so important when you're trying to communicate similar information to different people because people are taking that differently depending on their role, depending on their level, and then how they like to be communicated to. So I think all those things are very important.
That makes a lot of sense. Yisha, do you want to jump in here too? Is there something we didn't cover yet?
Yeah, first of all, I sure completely agree. Tailoring the method and sometimes the message to the recipients is an art. Um, and if you can't answer to yourself, like why should they care? then they probably don't. And about like like finding that the relevance for the business, I think goes back to that space that engineering is even given to talk about um, the processes, the metrics, what's happening. Either it's considered like a dark art. Yeah, you magicians go and do your thing. Hopefully, um, it's a valuable product we can sell. Um, or it's too technical. But I think um, like unlocking the connection between things like cycle time and predictability, right? Or our ability to learn cycle time. Like if we got it right, we have short cycles, we can learn from feedback much sooner and improve what we're doing. So that could be like predictability leads into marketing events, into how we communicate about our new features or products. Obviously feeds into sales, right? This uh, um, very sought after feature or capability is landing early enough in the quarter to actually impact this quarter, the numbers. That's immediate relevance for sales. So does this impact pipeline? Does this impact um, the numbers in sales? Like, is it this quarter or next quarter? Which segment cares about it? Those things begin to tie together. And then obviously for retention, right? For customer success, our ability to execute well in this part of the product or resolve quality issues fast through which is measured through metrics like mean time to restore or similar, that leads directly into customer satisfaction and retention and so on. So not just saying we have this metric, it should be improved, or we've improved it from X to Y, but also look at the impact this can bring and this brings to happier customers, less support issues, readiness for, we can coordinate a marketing launch around something because we are predictable enough in our delivery. We know this is landing in 2 months because we've mastered predictability. That's how you make it relevant to the rest of the org.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, last one on preparing before the meeting. But we talked a lot about what metrics and what to show, how to talk about them, but literally, how do we bring this information to people? Is it slides? Not slides? Tremail.
Again, dependency theory. Before I get to a deep discussion on dependency theory, I do want to pull on a thread that Ishai left out there for us. I think is really, really resonant and I think worth repeating that. A lot of the metrics that we deal with again, those inner loop metrics are leading and lagging indicators that make perfect sense to engineering. But when you are trying to effectively communicate, taking those metrics and making them make sense to the rest of the business and understanding, again, what context you're operating in and what matters most for the goals and objectives that you're optimizing for it's absolutely essential. And so I love that notion of taking things like mean time to response or mean time to repair and turning that into a retention metric, something that will heavily resonate with your go-to-market peers or with folks within the rest of the organization that probably don't care so much about your operational excellence, other than that it should be good. But when you're looking at those very specific, precise measures, and then you're trying to project those in a way that folks understand, finding a language that is basically easy to understand and that you don't have to do a lot of explanation. The best metrics are the ones that are self-evident. And when you reveal them, people can look at them and they can, to Tanisha's earlier point, ask really, thoughtful, thought-provoking questions, maybe not more than 3 or 4, as she said. And if you are in a position, regardless of the organization being more inclined to be right first, like perhaps you're in an Amazon-like organization where you need to write a 6-pager and everyone silently reads before a meeting, or you're in an organization that is presentation heavy, that's fine. Like I don't know that it matters as much as long as you understand what's going to resonate most. If you are in a presentation heavy organization, one piece of information that I could perhaps threaten to impart a little bit of at least my personal feeling on the audience today is build beautiful things. It's so easy to build information rich and dense decks that have death by 1,000 cuts of data points and all kinds of graphs and charts And those, in some contexts, you might have to do that because that's just your organizational culture. But if you have a little bit of leeway, a book that I like and one that I'll suggest for everyone is Gar Reynolds' Presentation Zen. Gar Reynolds was one of the folks that worked on the famous or infamous, depending on your perspective, Inconvenient Truth presentation that Al Gore gave. And Gar's book goes deeply into how to take that sort of visual design element that sometimes we leave to the wayside when we're using slides, and how to bring it forward in presenting data and data points in a way that will really resonate and leave people both feeling like there was rigor, but also that there was care. And I do think that oftentimes in our industry, when you're in sort of the engineering discipline, that notion of design being as important is sometimes left by the wayside. And I think it's actually critically important. Again, remember, these are people, and people are emotive, and they respond to things that make them either feel good or inspire thought or push them to ask questions. And so that one little nugget that I hope I can leave everyone with, if you are doing slides, is build beautiful things, please.
Less is more. So much.
I love this. Also, could you put a link to the book in the continuous learning channel at the end of this so folks can follow up if they want to have a look for it? Thank you.
Yeah. One more word. I think what Tramil just said, and also at the beginning of this session, you're an engineering leader. You have to be a marketer and a salesperson as well when you're delivering this, right? Get some help with UI to make it look nice. Find the right way to convey the message. Less is more. In Linerby, we have this deck that we provide to our customers of a good template for presenting up, which we get a lot of feedback on, and we've like fine-tuned it. What we see in most cases, yes, they opt for slides. That's typically the medium for most meetings. And if you can condense the information into 2 or 3 slides, and even not just condense it, like prune it so it lives in a couple 3 slides at most. Visually appealing, only the highlights, and you have to be able to storytell. That's what's gonna work for you.
Yeah, no one told us we'd have to be sales and marketing when we became engineering leaders, right? That's kind of cruel.
It's part of the word leader, probably, right?
But unfortunately true. Okay. So I love disaster stories. So I would love to hear about a time when someone did not communicate at the right level and things went wrong. I think Tanisha has one.
Yeah, this never happens to anyone else. I know I'm the only person that this ever happens to. So, we've had where my team has created an incident where, some code or something that we have pushed out created. There was just we brought the system down, to be very honest. And in that, we do root cause analysis of where we go in and we are updating our senior leadership on what was the cause and what was the impact and all of that information. And I know exactly what happened after the fact, but during the meeting, we went straight to technical problem. What happened technically, what was going on the server, what happened with the code, all of those things. And we saw a lot of people just glaze over. And the reality is that it wasn't just technical people in the room. We had business people, we had marketing people. And so being able to communicate at all different levels back to what's important to your audience and how to best communicate that, it really was a disaster. We got a lot of questions about they didn't even understand what the problem was, why this was an impact to the customer, what was really going on, what did the customer see? Whereas we went straight to here was what our problem was technically and really went into the details of the technical. So it was terrible. But what ended up happening is we ended up having to have a follow-up meeting, starting over from the top and really communicating at the top level, stepping down one by one based upon the questions and the needs of the audience and the room. So it was disastrous at the first, but we learned a lot of when we're in the middle of things and being so technical, remembering that we have to take a step back and what we communicate to each other is just as important as what we need to communicate up and to different people.
Yeah, it's so easy to jump into technical problem solving mode, especially when something bad has happened. It's never
Yeah.
happened to me, honestly.
Yeah.
So very much relate. So based on that, what are some things to be mindful of when you're communicating and performance, or maybe things didn't go so well to non-technical folks? Like what's the toolkit here for remembering to communicate to folks who may not understand all technical terms? Tremail?
I think the thing to recall is, again, these are people who may not have the same competencies or even the same concerns that an engineering leader may have. And so how we project the things that are deficient failure modes, fault domains, the type of reliability concerns we may have. I think everyone understands nines. And so if you're talking about uptime and availability, you probably can get away with that one, but that's probably it. When you're talking about any other sort of failure mode or any sort of non-functional thing that has gone awry, you have to put that into a business context. And so what Tanisha was saying, it resonates heavily. You need to be able to communicate in a way that is salient for the folks within your organization in a manner that they understand with the business context. So the site was down or the service was unavailable or the application crashed for this amount of time. Well, when you look at that duration of time, how many users were impacted? What was the context like? Look at similar days that you can look historically and time series the hell out of it and see if you can come up with some semblance of a proxy statement to say we believe that this amount of business impact has occurred. We'll continue, and it's always okay to sort of take a mulligan and say we need to go back and dive deeper to see exactly what has happened. But what the organization doesn't want you to do is avoid the hard discussion, right? And often, again, because we are always seen as these technical experts and to always have a quick response and the correct answer to every question, it's hard for us to be vulnerable in those moments. You can be rigorous and vulnerable simultaneously. You can say, look, this is what we believe has happened, and here are the factors that led up to that, all important information. Here's what we believe the business context is, or if here's exactly what the business impact was, and we're going to do further investigation. And we'll get to this later, I think, in this conversation today, but the thing that's most important in all of these discussions is that you have to be solution-oriented. That's why you're there. Right? We know that management is a job title, but leadership is a behavior. And the way that leaders show up is to be motivational and to look forward and to accept accountability and responsibility, but to also motivate everyone to move forward beyond those failure modes and those incidents and those problems so that we can go to the opportunities and look towards, a better version of outcomes, a better version of our organization and ourselves into tomorrow. And if you can present that, and I think, again, you should hit the nail on the head in a way that resonates. So be a bit of a marketer. Use your charisma. Use the words that you would use in order to try and influence and to convince, because that's what you're there to do, quite frankly. And once you do that effectively, you'll see that that resonates heavily. And I, again, think we'll likely talk about this a little later, but getting that most important thing for any engineer, feedback. Get that feedback loop going and get trusted individuals or get folks that are more than willing to be super generous with those bits of feedback. I'm sure that they're in your organization somewhere, and understand if the message that you're delivering is really resonating, and if not, adjust, adapt, improvise, and overcome. We're going to do all kinds of leadership memes today. So
Yeah, those feedback loops are so important. Ishai, do you have some thoughts also about things you're mindful of
So
communicating to non-technical folks?
yeah, maybe fight that inner urge that we engineers have of using technical terms and going deep on the details. I'll tell you a well-kept secret. No one cares about the details. Well, like I'm exaggerating, but sometimes like our tendency is to go into like the details, the tech, that can be construed or seen as you're actually trying to hide it behind a small screen because us non-technical people don't care or don't understand or both. And it's a way to evade the maybe tougher conversation about business impact or the fact that we don't even know what happened. Sometimes that's the truth. We don't know. We have some uh, more or less educated guesses. We have some ways to find out. Maybe we'll never know. That's also sometimes true. Um, so even if we're not trying to use that as a smoke screen, be aware that sometimes that's how it looks like. That's what it looks like. So avoid the tech, go like a level or two up. You can provide that tech detail if someone wants to double click, but in most cases, just talk about the business.
That is really good advice. Okay, we have one more question. I want to remind folks that you can also ask questions in our Q&A. I think we're going to have time to go through maybe 2 or 3 of those. So if you haven't asked questions, please jump in there and do that. So the last scripted question here is around what happens after the meeting. Like, how do you synthesize what you learned? Hopefully you got some good feedback loops going with some folks in that meeting. How do you synthesize what you learned? Maybe bring that back to your team, Tanisha?
So one of my coaches told me something a while ago that I still use today. One of the things is that within 3 hours of the meeting, recap it, start your actions, and really review your notes, recap, get it out, and start your action items. I find that if I do that, I'm not so far away from what happened that I can share and I can follow up and I can put some things in place. When I get out of that time frame or it's the next day, I have now disconnected from what was happening there, and it's harder for me to communicate back to my team, back to senior leadership to be able to get that information feedback because it's a little more disconnected. If it's a harder conversation, I may need that 24 hours, but if it's something that we've been working through, reviewing my notes, getting that recap out and starting those action items are critical within those first 3 hours right after.
Yeah, I love that. It's so easy to be like, the meeting is over, my work is done. And then you
Yes.
forget all that great information that was temporarily in your brain. So be like Tanisha and write it down.
Maybe
That
try
is
not to
smart.
have that meeting at the end of the day, right?
That too, or during lunch when everyone is hungry. Uh, okay, I am going to jump to some audience Q&A. Uh, how much of the business, i.e. mission, vision, and culture, should an individual contributor know to help them communicate with leadership? Like we said, we should put everything into business terms, but then wait, from an IC, how much business do I actually have to get into here? Anybody want to jump in and answer?
I'll kick us.
Um,
Oh,
Go
sorry. Go
ahead.
ahead.
Go
Oh,
ahead, Jermaine. Go ahead.
all right. Let's fight about it. No, I'll keep it short because I think Yishai probably has something deeply insightful to say here. And what I would love for everyone to take away is that those principles that we expose, the things that we write down and codify, you put it in your internal blog, you put posters up around the wall, you have your leadership and your operating principles, and they sound lovely, and they probably are, and you hopefully truly believe them and espouse them. But at the end of the day, culture for me, it's the people who show up every day, and it's the way that you sort of you validate through what you accept the types of behaviors that you have within any organizational construct. So one way of being quite direct about it, and maybe even a bit trite, but still factual, is the people you hire, you fire, and promote. That creates the culture of your organization. I say all that to lead into this notion of what principles we espouse and how do we sort of communicate with those principles in mind. Yes, indeed, I think you should, but if you really want those principles to resonate, make sure that your culture enables those principles to flourish within your org. And if you see that happening, and there are all sorts of ways, again, I think the easiest way is just be very judicious about the people that you invite to be a part of your experience. Make sure that, because I'm me, I'm going to say it, that you are mindful of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, that you're mindful of making sure that you have a reflective voice within your organization that again reflects the people you're serving or your customers. All of those things critically important. I think if you can handle those basics, sort of first principles thought around this very important question of how to espouse your principles when you're delivering any sort of news internally, then you're winning several battles simultaneously, not just effective communications, but building a durable organization that can thrive and deliver outsized impact for your customers. So those are my thoughts.
So to summarize, an IC should know the things that everyone is talking about at all hands, the principles, like the main strategy of the company, all the things that should be in the air anyway, but not necessarily be expected to know a lot of the detail underneath it. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And again, the way that you build an enabling construct so that it's easy for an IC to espouse those principles is probably a more important thing to take away.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather have them behave and everyone behave and be rewarded and reward others on behaviors rather. That's much more important than being able to cite the mission, or like read off the articulated way that we have chosen to codify that. If it's just words and memory, that's nice, but the behaviors is critical. I think one thing to add here, there's the mission, vision, culture parts, which we discussed, but then there's also the business context. And I think every individual contributor, and it's on us leaders to make sure that everyone has the context. Like, why are we doing things? At the like, oh, there's a huge deal that we're trying to win, or there's a customer that is that has some gaps that they're not happy with something. This is why we're doing this, right? And in engineering, sometimes it's easy to lose track of that, because I'm busy building this feature. I don't have to know why it's getting built, but if I want to do a good job, I really have to. So it's on us leaders to make sure we push context down all the time, and everyone's work is informed by that context all the time. And it's a challenge. It's hard, but I think that's where you reap a lot of rewards.
Thank you. There's a lot of good thinking in there. Okay, next question. Jamel and Yashar, you talked a lot about matching metrics to the business folks' needs and style, making sure they understand what velocity, cycle time, etc. mean. How do you identify and bridge that gap between like what we talk about, what we measure, and how they understand it? Anybody want to jump in here?
I'll let Yishai go first this time, since I
Sure.
took it.
There's always going to be a gap between the details of how you measure something, the data you collected for that. Is that a precise measure or something a little more software you have? If you're doing things right, you're using both qualitative and quantitative inputs, right? You have not just hard data, but also some of the softer inputs as well. But there's always going to be a gap. Everyone reading that data or listening has their own perception of what it actually means. What maybe the person asking the question is talking about, like fuzzier way of understanding. To me, focusing on what's the action? We can bicker about what the number means and whether it's the right number to measure and all of that. We can spend endless time on that. But if we take the conversation quickly enough to the action, what's our action? How are we going to change something in response, or even put effort on maintaining what we have? When talking about the action, there is much less fuzziness, right? It doesn't matter if it's a 7.8 or an 8.2 on what scale. If our action is to do ABC, to change it or to move towards the nines, that's where the core of the discussion should happen. And there, we've already skipped over the question of, does everyone fully understand the number to its most minute details?
I think we're about 40 years removed from Brooksian mythical man month type metrics. And obviously the contemporary, or maybe not obviously, but perhaps the contemporary narrative is all around DORA space, EDM, and other MBO variants. And I think those are all great things to use as proxy measures. And I use the word proxy very deliberately. The thing that you want to be able to do is take those proxies and translate them, as we've been speaking about a lot today, into things that are really important for the business, like what matters most. And if I can borrow from yet another management meme, Sun Tzu this time, know your enemy and do a string replace on enemy with your boss or your board or whomever your stakeholder might be, and know yourself. It's really important to know what's most important for that group that you're speaking to. What are their motivations? What are the things that they care about? What are the things that are driving some of their most deeply felt and exigent concerns, and tailor your message to that. The other thing to keep in mind is that you're there to solve problems. And if you are not showing up as a solution provider, then it doesn't matter how many metrics you bring, doesn't matter how articulate you are, doesn't matter how great you sort of translate those proxies into business measures. They want to see something moving, and you need to show that thing moving, move the needle in whatever way that makes most sense to where you exist. And so I would leave maybe this one very precise bit of advice. Find one or two things that matter most. Know that you can solution around those and move them towards positive gain, like whatever the baseline is, make it monotonically increasing, or if it's something bad, avoid it, right? And decrease whatever's happening, bad thing that's happening, and show those results. The more that you can do, the more trust you can earn. The more trust you can earn, the more innovation chips you get. The more innovation chips you get, the more you can keep building and delivering. And that's the game.
I would just add one last thing, and it's kind of a repeat of what has already been said, is that it's the actions that get to the outcomes that we are trying to get to. So, as an IC, all of the actions that you're doing, is it moving the needle? Is it making things better? And that's what we'll be seeing at a leadership level, is how is it moving, like we said, the needle? What are those actions that we are actually doing to make that happen?
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. How will the advances in AI impact the way leaders report out? How should they be leveraging the technologies available? In other words, should ChatGPT be writing our slides now? Who want to take that one?
I think engineering is it's probably not gonna be the first department to use ChatGPT to write up those slides. If it's about typically when presenting data to higher management, there's not a lot of pros. There's more like some numbers and some takeaways. I don't see a huge match with the core competencies of the LLMs and Gen AI for this specific purpose. If you want to summarize a lot of information, then great. But here it's more like telling a story from some numbers. So I'm not jumping on this opportunity, at least right now. There's other places where you can definitely leverage Gen AI to help move faster as an engineering organization, but for reporting up, I'm not so sure.
So I have a little different view. I think there are things that we are good at, and there are things that we're not so good at. So I think you could leverage ChatGPT to come up with creative ways to say things that maybe, like, we become marketers in the boardroom, and we're trying to sell our point of view and to leveraging the data that we have, because in a lot of cases we do go very technical. And so trying to turn that design and marketing view around, I think we could leverage all the different tools that are available to us to be able to get our point across for those different audiences because we may not have a good viewpoint and to be able to sell to a specific audience. So I think us being able to leverage that, I think helps us because we're just not the best at every single thing.
Yeah, I plus one what Tanisha said, but I'll also leave maybe a little motivational note for us all, myself included. Uh, Computers are dumb little boxes that we put symbolic strings into and interpret so that they do what we intend for them to do. Sometimes they do weird things because we can't anticipate all the confounding variables and multiplicative effects of distributed systems. But quite frankly, end of the day, they're just machines. And ChatGPT, LLMs, Gen AI, it's just statistics. We used to call it ML. Before that, there was some intersection of ML and data science. And we come up with these really fancy abstractions for innovation that's not really innovation, it's just incremental improvement. Will all of those advancements change what you are all here to do? I sincerely doubt it because, again, they're learning based off of prior knowledge. I mean, literally OpenAI and Anthropic just scour the internet looking for information so that they can build these models and then figure out what the next likely words should be. Like that's all a large language model does, but it's not innovative, it's not creative, it's not doing what you do every single day and understanding your people because you know them best and understanding the context that you operate in because you know that organization best. So you will all always be necessary. You may have, to Tanisha's very good point, a few tools to help advance your leadership and your thought or your rigor, but at the end of the day, it's still going to require a human to articulate and be the person there to, as I mentioned earlier, be the leader that folks need and deserve in times of strife. So please don't think that any advancement in AI is going to displace you, but only potentially enhance your position.
Our jobs are safe for now. On that note, we are sadly out of time, but thank you so much, panelists, for your great insights on the panel. We're going to head over to the continuous learning channel in the Lead Dev Slack. So if you have more questions or your questions didn't get answered yet, please come join us there. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next time.